Started in just a few minutes. Hi, folks. Welcome. Welcome to the session 3 of Track C. Folks want to share their name and where they're coming from today in the chat. And also, if you want to share one word that kind of sums up your convergence experience, if you've if this is multiple times joining us, if you could just share in one word what the convergence has been for you. We would love to hear that in the chat. I'm seeing energizing, expanding, invigorating, lots of good action verbs there. I love that. Hi, folks. Welcome to session 3. That's what we're here. We've landed at our last session together. Welcome. If folks want to share where they're coming from today in the chat, and also one word that describes their convergence experience. We would love to hear that in the chat as well. Solidifying, that's a great one. Hope, always important to walk away with hope. Hi all, we'll get started in just a few minutes. Welcome to session 3 of Track C. If folks want to share in the chat your name and where you're coming from today, and also one word to describe how the convergence experience has been from you. How would you describe the food convergence in one word? I know, very difficult to maybe distill, but we'd love to hear in the chat. Creative, that's awesome. Inspiring, groundbreaking. More energizing happening. That's great. More inspiration. Awesome. As we're getting settled in here, I'll probably say this again, but just as a quick tech note, if you can make sure that your name that you have on your Zoom name is what is going into the sign up sheet for our breakout rooms. We just want to make that process as easy as possible for our tech facilitator. So you can right click on your image to rename yourself, but please make sure your name matches your name you're putting on the sign up sheet. That's going to be very important. So welcome everyone to Track C. We'll get started in just a minute here, having folks share where you're coming from today, and also one word to describe your convergence experience. We're getting some great ones: uplifting, heartwarming, hopeful, more hope happening. Yes, enlightening, focused, and that's another great one. And we're so thrilled that you all have been with us for 3 weeks now. So it's such an interesting style and structure to our convergence here. So grateful that you all have been here with us. We'll get started in just a minute. Again, if you could just make sure that your name that you have on your Zoom account is the same that you'll be putting, or you have put on the sign up sheet for breakout rooms. Thank you all so much. more inspiration happening, amplifying. I love all the very like expansive words that are happening because we want things to keep expanding and moving forward. So thank you all. Thank you all so much for being here. All right, welcome, welcome. We're going to get started here. We have a lot to get to today, so folks can keep trickling in, but welcome to session 3 of our Track C as part of the main food convergence. For those who, this might be your first time here, my name is Shannon Brenner, and so excited to welcome you here today. Recordings of our first 2 sessions are available on the website and also in your participant packet. So if you missed any of that and you want to go back and take a look, please do. Whether you were here the past weeks with us or joining for the first time, we just want to stress that wherever you are in this process, you are so welcome and you are exactly where you need to be. Thank you for joining us today for our final session. This convergence literally would not be what it was without all of you. So thank you so, so much. Just want to plug a couple of ways to stay connected. We'll be talking about that more later on as well, but we have our network map that we talked about a bit last week. You're able to see connections between folks and visualize the web that's happening during this convergence. So please add yourself in if you haven't already. I'm still waiting for Kevin Bacon to show up. Thank you to all 3 of you that have caught this reoccurring joke of mine. I have to have my little joys here somewhere, I guess. So there's a link in the chat to sign up to be on that network map if you aren't already. And also we have a Slack channel that if you're not already there, it's a great way to keep the conversations going even after the convergence has ended. And maybe we'll be doing more with it in the future as well for communication and connection. So there's a link in the chat as well to join our Slack channel. So with that intro out of the way, I'd like to invite my teammate Christina for one last time to come up and give us a lovely grounding moment to bring us into this space after what I know might be long days for all of us. So thank you, Christina, for providing some grounding this afternoon.
Hey, yeah, my pleasure. It's nice to be here with you all. So we're just going to do like a 2-3 minute breathing exercise, get into our bodies, arrive here together. So if you want to find a comfortable seat, you can plant your feet firmly on the earth. And if today's been a particularly overwhelming day, just want to offer, you can rest your hands in your lap, or you might play around with what it feels like to take one hand to the base of the skull, another hand to the forehead, and just gently cradling your head there. That can feel really supportive sometimes. And invitation here is to close the eyes or cast a soft gaze downwards. And we'll start by taking 3 deep breaths together. So deep breath in through the nose. Open and sigh out through the mouth. 2 more times, just like that. Deep breath in through the nose. Open, sigh out through the mouth. One more time, deepest breath of the day so far. Pause at the top. Open and sigh out through the mouth. You can seal the lips here and just allow yourself to come back to an easy and natural breath. And we'll just start by softening around the eyes and the eyebrows, unclenching the jaw, maybe wiggling it a little bit from side to side, releasing any tension there. Softening the shoulders down and away from the ears. And then this is a big one, relaxing any tension or holding that might be in the belly. We tend to hold a lot there unconsciously. So just letting yourself relax. Letting the thighs and legs be heavy, the feet solidly grounded on the earth. Just letting the whole body be as relaxed as it wants to be. And here in this space, calling to mind a person or an animal or a place that helps you feel really safe and really secure. And just noticing in your body what it feels like to imagine that being or what it feels like to be in that place. And just sitting with those sensations for a moment. And knowing that you can call in this resource whenever you need a little extra support. And then we'll go ahead and start to wiggle the fingers and toes and maybe roll the neck around a little bit. And on your next inhale, you can lift the heart. And on the next exhale, slowly blink open the eyes. And then take a moment just to turn all the way to the left, all the way to the right. Take in the whole space. Remind your body that you're safe. And whenever you feel ready, come back to community. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Christina. It's so nice to have those reminders before we start this work together. While we're being intentional, I'm just going to take a moment to read a land acknowledgement to ground us on this land that we are currently living on. We farm, garden, fish, and work on the unceded territory of the Wabanaki Confederacy. Wabanaki peoples have stewarded the beautiful land we now call Maine for thousands of years and continue to today. The Maine Food Convergence Project stands in solidarity with Wabanaki land, food, water, and cultural sovereignty. We reckon with the past and ongoing harm and violence of colonization, acknowledging the land as atonement. Acknowledging the land is one small step of a long journey on truth-telling, atonement, and repair that can guide us towards a regenerative and equitable food system here. We must center Wabanaki leadership in order to vision a regenerative and equitable Maine food system. This looks like decolonization, reparations, rematriation, and more. Refer to the racial equity in the food system resource guide sent out in your participant packet for more info on these terms. And there'll also be more links in the chat for more information on racial equity and also initiatives led by Wabanaki peoples here in Maine. So to briefly go over today, we're going to close out our journey together. We're going to start by doing some framing of where we've been, what we're doing today, and where we're going. We'll give an overview of the actions that will be the topic for our breakout rooms, which are going to happen after a quick break. And then we'll have a little time at the end to do some cross-pollinating with reports from each breakout room, as well as talking a bit about the vision for the convergence moving forward. A couple of quick tech notes. If we're Zoom bombed, which has not happened yet, so knock on wood, we have a different link we will send you to restart the meeting. If you need a bio break, please go and take care of yourself whenever you need. Just don't log off. Just turn off your video and mute yourself. Keep yourself on mute if you're on your phone or if you're not speaking at that time. For tech questions, you can message tech help, Hazel. She is our tech wizard today, doing great things. You can adjust the view on your Zoom by clicking view on the upper right-hand corner. You can hit escape, the C key on your keyboard to exit full screen at any time. And you can also move that little bar between where the slides are and where people's faces are if you want to adjust the ratio there. And one last quick reminder that if you please make sure that your name is matching the name that you have put or will put on the sign up sheet for breakout rooms. You can rename yourself by right-clicking on your image and clicking rename. So we will also be recording today's session with the exception of the breakouts and taking screenshots. If you do not consent to having your image as part of these files, please turn off your video camera at this time. Going on to my all my fabulous teammates here. We've been truly blessed with a wonderful team to bring this track to life. Amara Fiji, Rachel Emis, Harriet Van Vleck, Christina Colillo, Mary Turner, Alexa Sky, Hazel Unserd. We could not have done it without all of these amazing people. We also could not have done it without all of the amazing breakout room facilitators that are in the room. So please, a round of virtual Zoom applause for all of our breakout room facilitators. Everyone is operating on some amount of Zoom burnout these days. So we really appreciate the extra effort that these facilitators are doing to step up and help us every Thursday evening leading our discussion. So thank you to them. So starting to frame our last session here, reminder of our mission here, to develop deeper relationships and greater trust as we co-create an equitable and thriving food system in Maine. So since relationships are such an important piece of this convergence, we want to talk about that for a minute. So we have a quick little poll here, if we could get that cued whenever you're ready, Hazel. And this poll is going to just ask about connections to the convergence, how many sessions you've been able to attend, and about how many connections you've been able to make since you've been here at the convergence. So if you could just take a second to fill out this quick poll. And while we have this poll open and folks are filling it out, I just want to invite for a couple minutes here, folks to unmute themselves or type out in the chat a really awesome connection that they've made during this convergence. It can be with another person or an organization or initiative, but we can just popcorn style for a couple minutes here, sharing an amazing, fun connection that you've made during the convergence.
I can chime into that first. This isn't particularly one specific connection, but facilitating a breakout in the second session, I just really appreciated the really intentional conversation that my group was able to have. So shout out to everyone who was in my breakout room for session 2. You all are so awesome.
Thank you, Amara. Any other connections that folks want to share that they've made so far in these 3 weeks? We have Catherine in the chat shared that they made a connection with a new member of their community that they didn't know with similar interests. So that's awesome that even though we're virtual, we're getting to meet people in our same communities and being able to come together in that way too. So thank you for sharing, Catherine. Any we have another connection here in the chat. Tyler reconnected with Susan after many years. So yay for bringing old connections back to life too. I guess it's kind of a small world in the in Maine food system. So it's all nice to have our paths cross again. So we can end the poll now and see what our results are. It looks like we have a lot of you attended session 1 and session 2 as well. That's really, really great. A few folks that it's your first time still, so welcome. And a lot of folks just made a handful of connections, and that's great. Even one more connection is a success, I think. And someone mentioned that they joined the food policy email newsletter from Ken Morse and appreciates the connection to that. Oh, I'm sorry, Tyler, we are not displaying the results. I forgot that's a 2-step process of that just polling sharing, isn't it? So there's the results for y'all to see. But somebody mentioned the food policy email, and we will be talking about that later this evening. We'll get a little bit of a policy connection from Ken. So glad that someone is appreciating that connection already. So moving on from our connections here. Oh, we're done with the poll. So the format of our sessions, last week we came up with activities that could help us address the identify top priorities that we identified in the first session. And then in this session, we're going to be diving into the next steps and how we are going to be organizing for collective action, starting to get that formation happening. Not necessarily a ton of details, but I'll provide more information about the scope of what we're looking for in a little bit. I just wanted to take a minute to review our pathway to change, just so we can kind of ground the trajectory. We are trying to kind of map what we're doing here at the Food Convergence. So this pathway is in the chat and also in your participant packet if you want to take a look at it. So where we've looked at current conditions and that create inequitable access to healthy food and identify priorities to address these conditions. And we base those on information gathered at regional dialogues in a statewide survey last year. And then with your help, we got down to the top 3 priorities, and from there brainstormed activities that we're now kind of calling actions. We're trying to frame them in an action framework. So if activities and actions are going to be kind of interchangeable if you see those words around tonight. So we brainstormed those activities and actions connected with those priorities. And then so our work today is going to be with these actions that we synthesized 10 of them from all of your wonderful input during session 2. No easy task. There were so many sticky notes. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful ideas. And we'll get to what those 10 are in just a minute. But looking forward, you'll see that as we work with these actions, we will need to work on impacts and outcomes, kind of depending on the shape of what these actions take moving forward, which is something else that we'll talk a bit about today. And then finally looking at our vision, which is a system that is healthy for our families, accessible and affordable for all communities, and fair to the people who grow, distribute, prepare, and serve our food. We'll want to be constantly evaluating and enhancing this vision as our work continues. So that's kind of a little scope of the trajectories of where we've been going. Just a little refresher of what our top track priorities were that we were working with last session. And that these, sort of informing the direction of the actions that we're taking today. So we had advocate for consumer economic empowerment, address infrastructure barriers to access, such as community development and transportation using the lens of food apartheid, and develop partnerships between local producers and fisher folks with organizations and institutions to increase access points and distribution centers. So really great work happening there. And from that, we got our actions. So we have here advocate for a thriving wage for all, facilitate organizational cultural shifts and educational opportunities to improve services, improve quality and quantity of donated food, build food hubs and community food centers, improve rural public transit options, compile resources about healthy food access to improve communication and knowledge sharing to the public and between organizations, develop communal and home growing spaces, diversify and decentralize food access points, offer food access programs within existing institutions, engage people with lived experience of food insecurity in the development of programs, services, and policies. So all of these actions are listed in a document that is in the chat as well as in your participant packet. So there's a lot there. I'm going to take a minute to talk about each of these activities real quick, but I do want to pause and just ask if there are any questions about kind of that trajectory that I just laid out and how we got to where we are today for our last session. I invite any verbal questions or questions in the chat. I'm gonna take a drink of water. I asked, we have asked for a definition of food apartheid. That's a great question, Lucas. We have a glossary that is in your participant packet. If someone could get that link in the chat now, that'd be great, but no worries if I don't know how accessible it is for my team to pull up. But basically, food apartheid, there's looking at, there's lots of different literature out there, and I highly recommend reading stuff, especially from Karen Washington. She is sort of the food advocate that coined this term. But it's basically, it's similar to the idea of food deserts, in the sense that it's looking at lack of access in certain areas to like healthy food, to grocery stores and other outlets for healthy food, but it's taking into consideration a lot of structural issues around how communities have been developed to exclude certain healthy food options. So it's a complicated topic that I highly recommend you follow up with in our glossary and reading and other resources if you want to learn more. And folks, feel free to chime in with additional information in the chat to add to my definition there. Any other questions about where we've been and how we arrived where we are today? So grateful for everyone who's helped shape where we are and shaped how we've gotten here today. So thank you all. We have a question. If you want to be in more than one group, Teresa, you can move if you want to, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But we're going to start with everyone in one group, and hopefully we'll be able to have some good networking happen and some, solid connections happening in one group. But if you do really want to leave your group for some reason to explore different actions, that is a possibility, and we'll get to that when we explain the breakout rooms a little bit. So just to talk about our actions, I'm going to go real quick through these. Again, my apologies, but we have a lot to get to today. So everything on these slides is included in the Track C action document that was shared previously in your participant packet. And the examples and outcomes that are mentioned here are only a starting point, and the examples kind of came from session 2, stuff that was brought up in session 2. And so if they're helpful, that's great. But if they're not, you can also ignore them for now, but they're there to give direction if needed. So advocate for a thriving wage. Examples of that would include policy advocacy and working with economic justice orgs. Looking at the next one, activity 2, facilitate organizational culture shifts and educational opportunities to improve services. So we're looking at how can we help staff and volunteers and other folks who are part of service providers and provide better service through nutrition education about seasonal food, cultural sensitivity, racial justice trainings, and also evaluating programs for accessibility of services and stuff like that in relation to community need. So that's kind of what came up in session 2 that we're trying to reflect in this activity or action. I should have changed that title to action on these slides, so my apologies. It's the same thing, action and activity. The next slide here, we have improved quality and quantity of donated food. So talking about gleaning programs at local farms and getting more healthy food donations from grocery stores, just getting more healthy food options for folks in the emergency food system that are accessing these services at this time. Next one is build food hubs and community food centers. So these could look like formally developed organizations like the Piscataquis Regional Food Center that we had Erin from there speak to us last session. Or they could also be more informal examples of shared storage and infrastructure within a network. If a couple of groups are sharing a refrigerator to store some product in or something like that. So that either option can kind of be discussed and thought about within the context of this action. Next one, improve rural public transit options. We can look at carpooling and ride sharing, as well as advocating for rural bus routes, and the funding is probably going to be a key component of that discussion as well. So that's activity 5. Activity 6 is one of the ones that kind of cuts across all of the priorities and is a really pretty overarching one. This one is compile resources about healthy food access to improve communication and knowledge sharing to the public and between organizations. So kind of looking at what already exists and methods of organizing and spreading this information that also consider the maintenance of those distribution networks. An example would be the main food atlas that's happened at the state level. And then also community navigators was mentioned a lot in session 2. And so that's the idea of having these sorts of knowledge dispersal happening at the local and regional level, as well as with local resource guides that are happening at that level as well. So that's activity 6. 7 is develop communal and home growing spaces. So looking at community gardens, involving land trusts and access to land through land trusts, as well as home gardens, getting people set up with gardens at their own home as a way to increase food access. So those are all great examples. The next one, we have diversify and decentralize food access points. Oh, I'm sorry, could we go back one slide? Yeah, perfect. Diversify and decentralize food access points. So we have, this is a mistake on my part. You will see I have the wrong examples listed on this activity. The examples that should be included on the slide are community fridges, mobile pantries, those sorts of options. And that's accurately reflected on your action document. So my apologies for having the wrong examples on this slide. Not everything can be perfect, I guess. So activity 9 is offering food access programs within existing institutions. And I do have the right examples on this slide. So we, from session 2, we talked about universal meal programs, food pantries and veggie prescriptions at hospitals, and prison garden programs. So those would all be examples of this idea of food access programs within existing institutions. And our last one, and is another one of the really broad actions that kind of incorporates all of the priorities. Engage people with lived experience of food insecurity in the development of programs, services, and policies. This came up a lot in session 2. So some examples of that could be through storytelling, which is an example of the Building Advocates Leadership Program. Rebecca, who was with us in session 1, she is a participant of that program. So that's an example of work being done with that, as well as advocacy. Witnesses to Hunger is a national organization that involves people with lived experiences of food insecurity to do advocacy work in Washington, D.C. So that's the kind of work that we want to have associated with this activity. So all of those are quite broad, or some of them are, and I think it's going to depend on the energy in the room, and I really leave it up to you all to kind of decide where the energy is within these actions, and what can be brought forward through this discussion. Oops, sorry. So the breakout room signups. We have, you should have received a link to this breakout room sign up sheet already, but if you haven't, please check it out. There's a link in the chat. Please go in and put your name in one action that you would like to work on this evening. And again, make sure it's the name that you have on your Zoom account. If for any reason you're unable to access the Google Doc, please message Harriet Van Vleck in the chat. She'll get you your name onto the action that you want to work with. If you're on the phone and unable to access the sheet or message Harriet, you can just stay in the main room when we've all gone off into cyberspace, and we'll get you into the room that you want to be in once all the rooms are launched. Please only sign up for one action to start. Like I said, you can potentially switch if you want to. You can leave a room, but please only start with one. if your name is in more than one place, just please go ahead and fix that and make sure you're on the action that you want to start with. As we're working on this collective Google Sheet together, it's always fun when there's, 20 people working on the same document, but please do your best to not overwrite anyone's name. Put your name on in an empty cell and make sure you hit enter after you type your name in so that your name appears in the column. And also just try to minimize the number of times you're moving your name around, wait till you're ready to commit, type your name in there, hit enter, and then just try to leave it there. And we can always move you around. Hazel is very, very good at getting people where they need to be. So if that is just how we could start this process this evening. Also, if we end up with only 2 people signed up for an action, we unfortunately aren't going to move forward with that action. We want to have at least 3 people and a facilitator in a room at one time. So if for some reason one of the actions has very low sign up, we will just ask folks that signed up for that action to hang out in the main room, and we'll get you to your second choice for an action at that time. Sorry for any heartbreak there. We'll see how the signups go in the next 10 minutes or so. Facilitators, wonderful, amazing facilitators. We're working on getting you all assigned to rooms as we configure them. We're doing our best to honor requests to be backups and the like, but we've had a couple of people need to bail. So most likely everyone will need to be engaged in some way, even if it's just as like a note taker providing support to somebody who needs support or is in a bigger room. Facilitators are encouraged to ask participants in your room to take the notes as well, if that's really helpful. Participants, if you're comfortable in Google Jamboards and using sticky notes, we really encourage you to offer to help our amazing facilitators. It'll make the process go a lot smoother for everybody if the facilitator can focus on cultivating conversation and have someone else support the sticky note generation in the group. So if you're comfortable in Jamboards, we encourage you to step up and help our facilitators out if they need it. So we will be announcing the facilitator assignments when we return from break. We just are going to need that time to get everything in line. So thank you all facilitators for your patience on that. I'll be going into the Jamboards and labeling, putting your name on the Jamboard that you'll be using, so you can look for your name in that folder like always. It's just going to be a little bit later this time. So yes, thank you so much for your flexibility and support. We are so truly grateful. Are there any questions about that? Can be put in the chat and we will deal with them as we're able to. Our team can help field questions about signups, but I think I covered everything. Thank you for working with our Google Docs system tonight. So the last thing I want to mention here before we go to break is this additional resources document that we've started. So something that we noticed while we were going through the session 2 feedback is that a lot of people were suggesting things that are already happening and already have some network support or organizational support behind them. So we wanted to just start. This is a not static document, and it's just it's incomplete, but it's a really great starting point of lists of additional resources and existing efforts that are happening around the state. We are so fortunate to live in a state like Maine with such a vibrant landscape of food organizations and networks and initiatives. So on this document, you'll find an incomplete but hopefully helpful list of what's going on in the state. We encourage everyone to use this as a starting point for exploring what's going on and learning more about what's going on in these different areas. You'll see on the slide there's links related to each of these 9 areas on that document. Also, there's a list of potential policy engagement opportunities that's been curated by Ken Morse, who will speak to us at the closing of the session about more ways to get involved with policy. If you want to check that out as well, if that link to that document could be included in the chat, we have information on connections to policy related to Track C. So hopefully these lists will be a helpful reference during our breakout rooms. And as you're working through identifying some potentials for each of your actions. And I will explain the exact scope of these breakout discussions when we return from break, but this is a really great starting point for all of us. So if you haven't had a chance to sign up, we please ask that you do that now. We're gonna take the break to finalize our rooms, so please get in that doc, speak now and forever hold your peace to get your name into a breakout room. But also, if you miss it, don't worry, we'll get you somewhere. Hazel is so fabulous with that. So we're going to have a 15-minute break. It's a little bit longer than last time just because we needed it last time to get these rooms set up. So we're going to give you all 15 minutes this week. Please return at by 4:55 is when we'll start up again. Just don't log off, just mute and turn off your video if you want. And all right. Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm sure we're all like super excited for the day when we can all just like walk into a room to talk to each other and not have to worry about the Zoom mechanics. But thank you so much for rolling with what we've had to work with for this convergence. I hope everyone had a great conversation. Whatever you talked about, however you interpreted the action or the prompts, whatever you talked about, your ideas are so welcome, and I'm so excited to hear them all. So like last week, I'm going to go and call out people based on the room that you were in, and whoever's the representative from that room can give about 2 minutes about the who, like a little summary of the who, and also the how, some of the potentials that you talked about for how to move forward. I made a little sign, which if you can see in the glare in my light, that if I'm spotlighted, hopefully you all will be able to see me still, and I'm just gonna, to try to keep things rolling, give a little visual cue there. So if we could so we can make sure we hear from everybody for their rooms. So let us begin. Action 1, someone from Darcy's room, thriving wage. What have we got?
So I'm going to present, and in terms of who needs to be put into or needs to have leadership, who's currently not in positions of power, people who are experiencing food insecurity and financial insecurity, wage workers, parents and educators, domestic workers and care workers, allies within the Department of Labor, labor unions. When we are thinking about next steps forward, there's thinking about the difference between hang on, let me collect my thoughts for a moment. So we talked a lot about sort of self-organizing and the importance of allyship between different movements, and when there's a whole range of movements that can come together behind one issue, that can really be, for a specific amount of time, that can really be a push forward. And looking further at what policies could be incorporated into making a thriving wage possible is thinking about new work sectors that we're not currently thinking about, countries whose policies are already more human focused, and using those as a framework for what we could do in the US and in Maine. Policies around child support, around unpaid domestic work, And youth leadership and potential leaders, and having training was something that we talked about as being important, and also reciprocity and wanting, if we want folks to show up for this movement, that people in this movement also need to be showing up for where they're not being directly affected. All right, that's all.
Wow, if I can keep my timer there. I'm so sorry about that. Thank you. That's perfect, Tanvia. Tanvi, thank you. I just had a request if folks just give a brief summary of your priority, just like mention what it is, and just so at the beginning of your summary, just so we all can be on the same page. But that was Thriving Wage. That was pretty straightforward. So thank you so much, Tanvi. That's perfect. Next, we have action 2, someone from Rachel's group. If you want to say what your action was briefly, and then jump into your report.
Yeah, hi. So our action was facilitating, or is facilitating, organizational culture shifts and educational opportunities to improve services. So we talked about a lot of great ideas here. We talked about working with Good Shepherd Food Bank and other major food banks in the state to learn what kinds of policies they have in place for their partner agencies in terms of and what kinds of training opportunities they have available around nutrition and seasonal food education for emergency food service providers, as well as cultural sensitivity trainings and anti-racism trainings. So kind of seeing what's already happening and going from there, and using that information to develop a baseline. Also learning from just the food assistance providers themselves. Learning from the people who receive the services, what would make the service more welcoming, more accessible, whether that's a change in in service hours, or whether having materials in new languages, etc. Also getting feedback from people who currently aren't being reached by that service. So partnering with other institutions and agencies such as Maine families, schools, teachers, DHS, churches, faith-based organizations, health centers. So yeah, gaining information from those folks, from those harder to reach communities. I'm nervous because of time.
2 minutes here, Rachel. So if you could just move to a brief statement about your how. Your structures moving forward.
So we discussed how we feel like the backbone structure is already there in a lot of places. So working with statewide agencies or larger food banks to determine what's already happening and kind of going from there. Working with food security networks to facilitate some of these conversations. Helping other communities start and coordinate food security networks. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, hope I got it right, team.
It's always so hard to summarize. I think you did great, Rachel. Thank you so much. So we didn't have enough folks to do action 3, improve quality and quantity of donated food. But if you're interested in that, I encourage you to check out the Maine Gleaning Network and other organizations that are working on getting healthy food into the emergency food system and other food access points for folks. So action 4, building food hubs and community food centers. We had 2 groups for this one. Someone from Mary's group, if you want to share out first.
All right, that will be me. Thank you everyone for their great participation during the group. Our action was to build food hubs and community food centers. And the first thing that we really had to define was there was really 3 different actions. One is a food hub, which was more of a food aggregator and a processor. And then a community food center, which is really a hybrid operation that may be bringing together farmers and having access to people who are struggling with food insecurity, but also having a retail component to it. And then also there is the non-physical network that's important that helps us to aggregate things and distribute them out to other people, but not necessarily actually have a physical location. And the people that we've determined that needed to be at the table to make this work would be funders, Maine Coast fishermen, farmers, New Mainers and Wabanaki neighbors, Growing to Give farms, institutions such as schools and hospitals, and also food pantry networks, including the community leaders that are accessing the networks, and also keeping in mind that we need to value their time. So that's something to keep in mind when we do our funding. And then also processing organizations if that's the way that particular food hub would like to work. And how to make this work is really kind of determining what activity is already happening in the state, and similar to the Maine Gleaning Network, which food hub work is already happening, and seeing whether those groups would want to work together to have as a learning process, and to as sharing their work, but also learning more. And then looking into funding opportunities through banks, and then working with policies, particularly with a lens for racial equity in terms of funding. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mary. I love the cross collaboration thinking that we have here. And the other food hub, food center group, Christina's group. So I'd like to report out from your conversation on the same topic.
Okay, so that was our group. So same topic. I won't reread it. So we talked about food hubs and food community centers, as we kind of discussed. Is this something where we're talking about like aggregation and a way for farmers to sell more of their products, or are we talking about food access and addressing food insecurity? And we kind of talked about it as a combination of both. So the who, we would need food producers, pantries, food councils, gleaners, educators, representatives from food retail and distribution, mostly for their expertise. And then once communities are identified to have these centers, then representatives from the municipal government. How we talked about I think we all agreed that the first step would be creating a learning group, because there are already these hubs and food centers being created in some communities around Maine, but they're all at different stages and using different models. So creating a learning group to first identify what's already being done, and learning from each other, and then maybe working with resources like the Maine Food Atlas and things like that to identify the appropriate places for additional food hubs or food centers. And so, yeah, we kind of agreed the first step is just bringing people that are already doing this work together to identify what's being done and what needs to be done moving forward.
Awesome. Perfect. I feel like there's just a lot of synergy happening here with like figuring out what needs to happen, and so much to process here. Thank you, Kelly. We did not have enough folks to do the rural public transit. I think that that's always going to be an issue, especially in Maine. So here's hoping that that can be incorporated into other action work, or, you know, that having that inform our thoughts moving forward when we think about access. Always be a struggle in Maine, I feel like, that we will always be working on. Action 6, someone from Jimmy's group, would you like to step up to report?
Yep, this is Tyler. I'm going to be reporting out. we paper, rock, scissors for this, and I lost. So that's where we are.
And you can just say the action too.
All right, so we were action 6, which was compile resources about healthy food access to improve communication and knowledge sharing to the public and between organizations. And we started really by listing all of what we knew were existing resources, both places to find information and places to find actual food. We talked a lot about what already is working, what already exists. We had a lot of ideas. 4 big ones that came up are 211, Aunt Bertha. If you haven't heard of it, look it up. The community food councils, and then the main food atlas. So thinking about that took us into sort of who might be able to kind of move. And we're really coalescing around the idea that we don't want to reinvent any wheels, and we don't want to create new organizations or structures that aren't absolutely necessary. And there's a lot of really good, really coordinated, highly effective work already happening. We really want to elevate that. And we talked about all these different resources and all these different networks as being different wheels, and we want to hook them all to the bus so that they can all be moving together. So who might really need to be into the room is funders, of course, the Healthy Maine partnership sort of orgs, the healthies that have landed in different places, mutual aid, grocery stores. So really thinking about moving food into all of the spaces where we currently spend time. So libraries and schools, so very much in line with the hub idea as well. And then we really want to, thanks Shannon. So next steps to move the priority forward, we just really thought of like an assessment very much needs to happen first to really respect all the hard work that's already gone into this effort. And over the last, I think really 6 years, there's just been a ton of growth in this sector. And so now it's the time, everybody's been doing their growing in their regions and their sectors, and it's time to bring all that together. And we really wanted to make it clear that we understand that there's a capacity gap, and that's why this hasn't happened yet. And so to be really thoughtful about a networked, coordinated approach and building capacity in there so that it doesn't just land on top of somebody else's already full workload within their silo.
Absolutely, Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's build that bus and get it all moving together. I love it. Great job. Action 7, someone from Marguerite's group.
I am presenting on behalf of our group. Our action was develop communal and home growing spaces. And so quick takeaways, we talked quickly about who wasn't involved in these kind of conversations or developing communal gardens is what we mostly talked about. And people using food pantries aren't necessarily in these conversations. The community gardeners themselves in a lot of communities don't necessarily have input. They just show up and use the gardens. Local farmers don't necessarily have input, and policymakers need to be, I feel like, more involved because it's different from community to community, and we, not I, our group. So we, our big takeaways were just helping Maine create an umbrella working group. And one of our brilliant members was familiar with Vermont Farm to Plate, which is kind of a overarching group nonprofit that puts people together, and same Massachusetts Food System Collaborative. So we thought that would be a great idea for Maine, that we have a big umbrella group that helps disseminate information, or when people come to them can give out the information. It's been done before, here it is, tweak it for your community. And then one of the couple of buzz phrases, cafeteria style choices for what people might want to look at improving communication systems between the other groups. So putting groups together down in South Portland up to the county and over to Incredible Edible and in Millbridge and that sort of thing. And then convening groups to discuss, and that's all as far as I got. So convening those groups at one point or another. So that was our big takeaway.
Awesome, great. Sounds like I had some great work in there. Thank you so much, Susan. Action 8. Someone from, I believe Regina was the facilitator there.
Yeah, I'm going to speak for that. Action 8 was diversify and decentralized food access points, and we started with brainstorming what we need for that action, and transportation was a big one. Understanding mutual assistance and current infrastructures that support decentralized food access points in communities. We talked about some folks who need to be involved in this and might not have been, as school staff, administration, more BIPOC community members, hospital, admin staff, transportation workers, folks experiencing food insecurity. And then we got to talking about sort of next steps and really trying to be honest about whether or not this was a coherent enough goal to be working across towns and distance within the state, or if it was really better to focus on relationships at a local level. And it seemed like a lot of us felt strongly that building better relationships with each other and with the places that we reside in, and getting to know our neighbors in a way that allows us to understand and connect towards deeper and more thriving communities as support networks for I feel like I'm rambling, so I'm going to stop there. And yeah, thanks for everybody who was a part of my group. And
that's great. I love that you talked about that relationship component. That's so big for the convergence. So I'm glad you guys landed there. Thank you for sharing, Lucas. So we had 2 groups for Action 9. If someone, I lost my spot here. Someone from Ali's group wants to report out.
Sure. So I'll be reporting for my group. Our action was offer food access programs within existing institutions. And so my group was awesome. There was also just a lot of chat sharing of like articles and resources during our breakout group, which I really appreciated. And so, yeah, with the WHO, we also had some great people in our group, like Gleaning Network, some funders and foundations, MAFCA. So a lot of great people in the room, but also some people we thought that needed to be involved were people in the BIPOC community. Also, we talked a lot about seasonal workers in Maine and how they will need to be included in future conversations. Farmers and policymakers as well were people that we wanted to see kind of moving forward, and also thinking about the vast college network in Maine and how those are like institutions that we think will be important moving forward. In terms of the how and next steps, we kind of like struggled with this one a little bit. You know, we thought like our action was so broad, so we would need like work groups for hospitals, work groups for prisons, work groups for schools. So, you know, kind of breaking it down would be important moving forward. And then also meeting people where they're at and thinking about advocacy and access and convenience. You know, we talked about how, you know, people will make good choices for themselves and healthy choices for themselves if they have a thriving wage, and making it easier to make those choices. So that would be important. So like providing access points in institutions and working with some of the other actions to make that easier. And I hope I wrapped it up well for my group.
It all sounds great to me. Thank you so much, Ali. Someone from the other group 9, Malia's group. If you would someone like to report out from that group.
Hi, I'm Adrian. So we were also talking about food access programs within existing institutions. So we felt it was important to first establish, when we say institutions, what do we mean by institutions? So schools, prisons, hospitals, healthcare providers, shelters, community centers, libraries, childcare providers, government service offices, universities, the list goes on. So institutions in general touch all age groups, are all over the state of Maine, and can really be opportunities for food access points. So we also talked about what was already in existence. I come from the federal child nutrition world, so I always remind people of the existing opportunities like school meals or the summer food service program that's operating right now. Right now, meals are free to all children 18 and under through the end of June, and the summer food service program will kick back in the summer, and we'll see what happens with that. So that is there. So that's kind of where the conversation went with universal meal programs, talking about how right now we have universal meal programs because of the COVID pandemic, and how can we make that happen. There's already a lot of traction happening in the state with this. We have a lot of partners who are working on it. Legislation is going to be introduced to see if we can get universal meals for students in Maine. So that's kind of already been established. And I think there's a lot of momentum, not just in Maine, but around the country. So we'll see what happens with that, but it'll be an interesting opportunity for all. We also talked about the red tape that's in place with some of these programs. I'm very well aware of the red tape because I provide oversight to some of the programs that have a lot of red tape. And so a lot of the red tape was removed because of the COVID pandemic, and maybe it doesn't all need to come back when the pandemic ends. So the considerations about the barriers and what actually needs to be there in the long run. And with that, let me just go through the next slide.
That's about 2 minutes. So
all right, that's fine.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to recognize that it looks like we are going to run over by about 5 minutes this evening. So if folks need to leave, please do so. Take care of yourself, what you need to do. But please, if you can stay with us through our last report out, and we're going to talk about the reconvening event and some policy updates. So if you could please stay on just a little bit past 7, it will make it worth your while, I promise. So to hear from our last group, perhaps the best way to end this reporting out from this action, action 10, getting lived experience, hear from folks. So if we could have someone from group 10, Amara's group, please report out.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually try to be super brief. So our group talked about engaging people with lived experience of food insecurity in the development of programs, services, and policies. We spent a lot of time talking about collecting stories from people with lived experience with food insecurity. And we talked about testimonials. So collecting those on a statewide level in an organized effort would be super important. Also, yeah, we had a lot of very passionate people in our group who are already doing this kind of work on an individual level and for their organizations, like, for example, Good Shepherd and various pantries. And we would like to rope in a lot more organizations that can connect the dots to do this kind of work. That said, we also talked about looking inward at our own organizations, at our leadership structures, at our boards for nonprofits, for example, and thinking about how we can put people, we can shift power to people with lived experience with food insecurity. And to move this priority forward, again, yeah, like looking at more diverse leadership, looking at like collecting those stories and then using those stories to influence policy. And that's that's extremely important. And with that, I'd like to quickly plug the Cumberland County Food Security Council is putting on a food policy forum next Friday morning from 9 to 12. It's going to feature Rachel Tablet Ross panel and various breakout rooms. So I will put that in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. I think Ken's going to plug that too. So if you want to put it in the chat, but we will have more information on that for folks as well. So great way to end. Thank you so much, Lauren. For folks, you can stay on just for another few minutes. Oop, there's my timer. I just want to briefly discuss opportunities to stay involved with the convergence moving forward. So we have a reconvening event happening on March 11th, next Thursday. So if you have another Thursday night free, come join us from 4 to 6. The reconvening is going to focus in part on next steps. So each track will present outcomes from our discussions. So you'll get to hear about what's happening all over the tracks. Detailed feedback form is also going to be coming later this week to you all, and we'll have information from that feedback form shared at the reconvening. We're looking on how to get organized as a collaborative more. I'm looking at towards developing a regular annual or biannual convergence event like this, maybe in person next time. How cool would that be? And so some ways to stay involved and stay up to date with the convergence would be signing up for our newsletter on our website, staying involved with the Slack channel, and checking out your participant list. And all of this information is in a convenient document that we've made for you all called Stay Connected. That's in your participant packet, and we're going to put a link in the chat right now. And that has all of the information about all the different ways to stay connected and explore the connections that you've made here at the Convergence. So I'd like to turn it over to Ken for a couple of minutes here. Ken, please plug away, fill us in on some food policy opportunities. If you are still there, Ken.
Sorry, I was muted. I realize the time is short, but Lauren saved me a little bit of time because she promoted the food policy forum coming up a week from tomorrow, which I'm helping out with a bit. And I mostly wanted to talk about some sort of more urgent things because they're happening so soon. First, I would mention that LD 437, which is an act to establish Maine Healthy Soils Program, had a hearing this morning, and you know, you can go onto a YouTube channel and watch the hearings. It's really easy, and if you just search the Maine legislation committees, you can easily find that, and that's what I did this morning. So I think overall, it seemed like there was a lot of support for that. Things will move forward. The other thing I wanted to point out is the next one on that list, LD 489. That's a green amendment to the Constitution. That's a big deal because if we can pass it, it establishes a constitutional right to pure water, clean air, stable climate, and healthy environments. And that would create a foundation for a lot of policy work in the future. I would just mention that next one, it hasn't been published yet. There is an LD, but it is the Maine farm to plate bill that is what Susan had mentioned a few minutes ago. I'm not going to go over all the rest. I would just point out that I did put I just did put a few things into the chat. It's great if you subscribe to the Policy News. I publish it every week, and these bills are complicated, and there's a lot of information about when the hearings are happening and when the work sessions and how to contact and so it's way beyond what we can deal with here. But there's also, I put a link to two other things. One, Maine Conservation Voters is having a session tomorrow about tribal sovereignty in Maine. So I would encourage folks to sign up for that. It's at noontime. And the other is there is a petition in support of the Maine Green Amendment. And we'll call that good. There's other things listed on the screen there, but we'll call that good for now.
Thank you, Ken. I'm so sorry we didn't have more time, but folks can check out the links in the chat. All the links that Ken has mentioned are on that Stay Connected document that you have, and also on that policy document. All of the notes from his slide here are on that policy document, and all of those have been shared in the chat and are in your participant packet as well. So, with that, thank you so much for everyone who has been here, for everyone, to all our breakout room facilitators. This has been such a process for myself and the entire Convergence team. Thank you. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. Please stay connected and get involved in the amazing orgs and initiatives and actions that have been discussed here in these weeks. I'd like to leave you all with one last quote to keep our fires burning and to carry us forward in this work. The challenges before us are monumental. We are not obligated to complete the task of repair, but we are required to act at the intersection of our capability and what the world needs. To maintain silence is to cast our vote for the status quo, to passively endorse a racist and exploitative food system, and to deny ourselves agency over the destiny of our community. So I hope that we can all claim our agency, we can all continue to make connections and build a better food system for Maine together. Thank you so much for being here and being part of the Convergence. Please stay in touch. Facilitators, we will be on here for a few more minutes if there's anything you'd like to share, but please, everyone, have a wonderful evening. Take care of yourselves. Take care. Keep doing this work. Thank you so much.